All right, so turns out I was not recording anything on the past few of these, but so I'm basically starting over. I'm just going to walk you through this real quick, though. So this is basically a tutorial on how to create the final for this class. Uh, Remember that the final includes still renders of your character, still renders of your object, like the prop that you made and textured. And if you want, you can include the walk cycle as well. And finally, your animated character. So the character has to move. I said somewhere around 10 seconds, but if you're at like 5 seconds, that's fine. If you're at if you did something that's like not just a walk cycle, then feel free to loop that, because like you're basically looping a walk cycle, you know. But let's see. So render. So I have a scene with my walk cycle in it. Um, and I've basically gone in and imported a bunch of different objects as well into the scene. You can see that there's a bunch of trees here. I'm also using these just to kind of cast shadows down here. But if you just have a landscape, like a empty landscape with your character, that's fine too, you know. And I just wanted to show like having an environment with the character, and he basically just walks along here, you know. And this is the rendered camera that I'm going to use. So let's get rid of that cache. So just all right. New Maya can has an issue switching between viewports and then playing it like that, because it saves your timeline like preview in its memory. But I'm just gonna go in here. So I have this character walking through the scene, and that's it. That's the animation. So if so now it's just I have a tutorial showing how you set up the cameras, and here's the render settings that I'm going to use for this. If I go into I have to open up my rendering tab first, and we're going to be using Arnold, remember. So in the render settings, if I open those up, a lot of the times if you haven't rendered anything before, it might start by default on my software. We don't want that at all. We're going to be using Arnold Renderer. And image format, we're going to be doing PNG. And you can use the other ones too, but like I like PNGs because they give you some alpha in case you need it. This name, name, like the file name, and then the number, the frame number, and then the extension is the setting we're going to be using for this. If you use either of these top ones, it's not going to render out an animation. It's only going to do, see how it says single frame, it's only going to do one frame. So I like using this setting. Frame padding 4 has never done me wrong. And then here you input your start frame and your end frame. So if you have a camera change in your animation, you would have this start frame be at the first part of that camera change, or like that's the first camera, and then this end frame would be when you cut, like the moment that you're going to cut to a different camera. So that would be end frame 200. Make sure renderable camera is set to 1, or whatever camera is right here. It might be, I don't know, camera 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever. We're going to be outputting an HD movie, right? So we're going to be using 1080p, 1920 by 1080, and in the Arnold Renderer, this top setting is your anti-aliasing. It's going to do a bunch of different rendering passes as it goes through your scene. The higher you go, the better fidelity you're going to have of your image. If you go low, like 1 or 2, you're going to get some fuzziness. By 4, most of the fuzziness is gone. Like by 6, it's like non-existent. By 10, it's you know, it's perfect. So we're going to be using 4 for this setup. If you have a bunch of objects in the background casting shadows around and stuff, each frame took about 2 minutes to render with my hardware, so multiply 200 by 2 minutes, and then that's how long it's going to take. So it would take a while for that. If you have an empty landscape, it's probably closer to 1 minute. So 200 by the 1 minute, you know, just do the math there. That's like let's see, 120 is 2 hours, so then 200 minutes of that would be just over 3 hours. So keep this in mind. If you need to go down to like 2 or 3, that's fine, because you know it'll just be a fuzzier image. And if you have a sick fast movement, you might want to turn on motion blur so you can get some of that in there. And if you have any sort of special effects, you might have to adjust the ray depth. Like if you have like a piece of glass or something in your scene that you want to render, you might have to change some of these. So that's just something to keep in mind. But I'm basically leaving these settings at default, the motion blur and ray depth. And so yeah, just make sure it's using Arnold Renderer and is set up to something around there. And then instead, to output the images, normally if you look online, it's probably going to tell you to do batch renderer, but if you do that right now, Arnold, since you're probably on a student version, Arnold is going to put its watermark all over your image. So instead, if you do render sequence, and do the options on there, you set this to be your camera, and you leave all these unchecked. This is after you have your animation like done, by the way, because this is the final render. Like this is gonna be the images that we see, you know. So, and then I leave all these checked, and I set an output directory. So I'm putting it in my export, and you can see that I've rendered this out before. And so I'm gonna select that folder, and then you're just gonna hit render sequence and close, and it should be good to go. Remember, this is after we've set up the scene for rendering. So if you want to preview the scene, you want to open Arnold Render View, and then it's gonna start taking snapshots. So that way you can adjust your lighting. The only lighting I have in here is a physical sky, and I go over that in my other video. So check that out, how to set that sort of scene up. And then, so we rendered that out. And then, now, if I go into, I'm going to have to open up Premiere. So bear with me here. Premiere. So now we need to, it basically output a bunch of images. It output a PNG for every single frame in the movie or in the animation. And what we need to do now is go into Premiere, import that as an image sequence, and it will kind of automatically compile that as a movie for us. There are some things to think about, because if you animated in 30 FPS in Maya, I'm not going to touch the computer so it doesn't freak out or anything. If you animated in 30 FPS in Maya, then brought it in to Premiere and interpreted it as 24 FPS, you might have to change that. So I'm just going to do a new project and show you what I'm talking about. So name, final render. The old one was final render 1, so I'm just going to do final render 2, so I don't have any weird overlapping of project names. You'll probably be fine to just do final render. So this is where you import media, and if you just right click and import, and you'll see this is the sequence that it rendered out. And so now I'm going to click that very first one, the 10001, and click image sequence right here. This is the important button to get it to bring that in as video. And you'll see now if I scrub through this little preview, it's moving around. And I'm going to go straight to the properties and check. Yeah, so it says 29.97. That's essentially 30 FPS. And I was animating in 30 FPS, so I don't have to adjust any settings. However, if you were animating in something else like 24 FPS in Maya and then interpret it as 30 when you brought it in here, you might have to right click this, modify, interpret footage, and then assume this frame rate. You'd click on this and then do 24. Boom, right there. So that's if you have a discrepancy there. Mine is fine though, so I'm going to leave it like that. And then we need to basically get, let me make sure this is still recording. Yep, looking good. We basically need to now get everything out of the scene except for the character, because I just want some character stills that you guys spent a lot of time on the character, so we should get some nice renders of it, you know. And I'm going to basically, I'll just do it in front of you right here. So I'm going to go through and just delete out pretty much everything, but let's do it through the outliner. It'll be a lot easier there. So I want to keep this plane. I want to keep the sky dome light, and I want to keep the characters. So pretty much everything after that is unnecessary. So I'm going to delete those. If you brought in, you could also do this in your rig file. If you have the character rigged up, you could just open up the source rig file, and they'd be T-pose, you know. I'm gonna show you what it looks like with a file that's been messed with. So right then I would save as. I've already done this before though. So I would file save scene as, and then do like character render, and you'll see that it is right here. So I basically deleted everything, and then changed, before I do that, I also went into the material attributes and then made this a much more gray neutral color. So you'll see that in here. And I selected every control on the character. And let's see, open. I'm gonna get this render sequence out of here in just a sec once the file opens up. There we go. So then I also I deleted all the keys off the character and kind of just gave him a natural pose. If they're in T pose, it's not too bad. I mean, that's what the character comes as. So then I go in and kind of posed up the character just by, you know, selecting each control, moving around, and then set my you have to enable your resolution gate just so you can see what you're going to be rendering. And then I just went back to my render settings, and Arnold Render right here. I crank this up to 6 because that's going to give you a lot more fidelity in terms of the final image. If you keep this low, it's going to look a little bit fuzzy, like a lot like this little preview of the sky dome right here. It's going to look a little bit fuzzy, so keep that in mind. If it's lower, for these single one-off type things, because this is just going to be a still image, I'd like to see the passes set up to 6, so just so it's not going to be like fuzzy on the stills. There's no reason to have fuzzy stills at this point. Like if you go into the settings for the sky dome, you can then change that up just like I showed you in the other video. And basically you're going to take this frame, you're going to open up your Arnold render view, and then make sure it's on perspective shape to preview this stuff. You can see that that's what it's doing right there. So when you're happy with that, you're gonna well, first of all, I'm gonna stop this. You're going to go into your render settings, make sure it's set back onto 6. I always find it's helpful when you're doing that preview to turn down to 1 or 2, and then set this to like HD 1080. And then since I use perspective camera, I'm just going to go back to renderable camera and set that to be perspective. But for the final render, I'm just going to do 1 frame, right? So I'll show you how to do this. If you close this, if you set this back to 1080 and make sure all your other settings are correct. The start end frame doesn't really matter for how I'm going to do this. If you go to this little button right here, it's just going to render the current frame. And so you'll see how the Maya software, or the Arnold software, goes in and starts rendering these out. You might be able to hear my computer dying in the background while it's doing this image. And then once you get your image done, you can just go to File, then Save Image. And I'm going to save it to that same export directory that I sent all my other images, so you can see it here. This is basically that same image. I'd like to get one more angle of the character, so I'm going to get another. I have one frame that's like this, and then I have the other frame that you just saw right there that was like this. So I'm going to get another one just to round it out. I'll just show you render settings. Go back in here, Arnold Renderer. See, did you see how fuzzy that last image was? It's because that was at 2. So if I set it to 6 and I close out, well, let's make sure it's at 1080p. Yeah. So I'm going to go in, render, and oh wait, no, I already set the render settings. So if I just click render again, you'll see it's going to set to blue, and it's going to start to go square by square to get that image. It's going to take a lot longer this time though. But you'll be able to see that the render is just a lot more clear. Like look at the different gradients on him. Oh, it's, if you're struggling, you can see like these gradients aren't nearly as fuzzy. These like shadowed areas aren't fuzzy as well, you know. So that's the point of that top setting. It's that anti-alias, but it does dramatically add on to it doesn't dramatically add on to the render time though, you know. So so that's just gonna render out for a little bit here. I'll let it finish up. I don't want to touch my computer or like click anything just because it might mess up. And oh, it's thinking. Please don't break. Okay, so seems to be back to normal. I'm gonna go to save image, and then I'm gonna go to that desktop file, my export character render 3. Save. I'm also gonna check OBS to make sure it didn't crash again. Okay, sweet. So that's still recording. Hell yeah. All right, so now we have. So if you do that same process and get 3 different kind of angles, you could go in and I'm just going to import. I'm going to import my render 1 right here. Import render 2. And I'm going to import render 3. Wait a minute. Oh, I messed up. So see, I accidentally left that import image sequence on that first one. So I'm just going to click on this and delete that out. Make sure. So I'm going to import right here. I'm unchecking image sequence. So there you go. Right there. Right there. Import again. And import my final one. Right there. Okay, so then you can start dragging it in there. Dragging these images in there. I'm going to show you first the prop. So remember, we also have to get renders of our prop. So I'm going to save this scene out. Whoops. I'm going to save this scene out. There. Continue. File. Recent files. And I'm just going to start from scratch. So I'm going to do a new scene. So we got this blank scene, fresh scene, ready to go. And I'm going to bring in a file that I've, or a model that I made earlier this week. So if I go in my game directory, props, swords. So this is basically a pair of toddlers' scissors, and you'll see here that's what they're looking like. I'm going to delete these duplicates right there. So this is what they're going to be like. This is what we're going to render out. It is a very low poly game, so you know you'll see some things. Oh, we have a shading error right here though from the last time I fiddled with stuff. So I'm going to go in there and just fix that right up with soften edge right there. Perfect. Yeah, sorry about that. And so we need to, our goal is to render this out. I'm going to kind of get a sort of studio lighting type of setup going for this. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to get this above the grid, just this is the first step. Also, the grid's super tiny, so I'm going to adjust my settings and preferences. Whoa, whoops. Setting preferences. There, settings. Changes from centimeters to meters. There we go. So this is, each one of these squares is now a meter. And first step, I'm going to kind of just make a plane like this. I'm going to kind of move it back. So this is going to be that matte sort of like very light material that they have in the background of like photography studios that, you know, it's like where it's kind of just meant to like bounce light around and look nice that way for like catalogs and such. So if I just click this back edge and do shift and then press period, it's going to expand my selection. And this will be good. So if I rotate with holding J, I can snap to make sure it's perfectly 90 right there. And I'm just going to raise that up right there. And I'm going to go into modeling, and I'm going to make a multi-cut right there. I'm going to select that edge, kind of push it back in. I'm going to multi-cut yet again. Whoops. Multi-cutting right there. Oh, right there. Perfect, perfect. I'm just going to kind of move those back in. Just get that gradient. And I'm going to save my scene. So I'll just do a save, regular save. I'm going to make sure this doesn't save into that directory because I don't want to mess up my game directory. I'm just going to go into my export. I have my old image scene there, but I'm just going to save over that. So there we go. Next, we need to assign a new material. I'm going to use an Arnold standard surface shader right there. And you'll see if I go back to the material attributes, I can map the color to something, to a file. Let's open that up and bear with me while I dig through my folder hierarchy. Oh wait, no, that has to be in the assets. Swords, swords. So we need albedo.png. Open that up. Let's make sure that it didn't attach. Okay, cool, cool. If I press 6, you'll see that that activated. However, this default material got overwritten with that color when I imported the model. So if I break a connection, you'll see that it's back to its normal state. And I'm going to make this kind of white, just to bounce some light around in the scene, you know. And so we're just kind of set up a basic 3-point lighting. I'm gonna make a cube, just a default cube. I'm gonna kind of move the model on top of that, and let's try to get this at like an interesting angle, just so we can kind of see it. Because we're gonna have a few renders of this one as well, and I'm just gonna pose this out on there. And get there. Right there. So then I'm going to rest the other part of that up against another cube. You know, might as well. This might end up looking like some sort of weird art gallery piece, but you know, not opposed to that. So let's have that in there. And let's get it up snug against those scissors. And we're just going to get this snug with the back of that. Now you can set up your scene however you like. I'll probably provide this just for the class, just so you guys have something as well. So now I'm going to save these again. Boom, right there. And I'm going to open up that Arnold Render view. Actually, first I'm going to, my bad, I'm going to switch back to the rendering tab, and then go to the render settings. You can also access render settings through here, but you know, whatever. I just want to show you where it is. I'm going to do PNGs, And I'm going to be rendering from, I don't want to do perspective. So I want to make a camera in the scene again. So create camera right there. I'm just going to scale this up so I can see it easier. And I'm going to press space to get all of my panels. And I'm going to switch one of these panels, this bottom one, to camera 1. So now you can see what it's rendering out. And then you can see even better if you enable the resolution gate, which is this button right here. And so I'm going to get kind of like a front-on kind of angle, but I'm going to have a little bit offset, you know. So this is the camera that we're going to be rendering from. So I'm going to go back to my render settings. And we're going to use camera 1. And I'm going to do HD 540 just for my preview renders. And I'm going to crank this down to, let's do 2. So there we go, perfect. Also going to cut OBS and start a new one just so I don't lose the progress that I've had so far. All right, so now we need to render out this scene or start doing some preview renders. So I'm going to go to Arnold and open render view, and I'm going to change this immediately to camera shape 1. Otherwise, it would just render this top view. I want this bottom one that we've kind of aligned to our object better. So I'm going to just press play on there, and you'll see it's like, hey, no lights in the scene. So this is the same thing that we were seeing earlier. You can see in the video before, is that you need lights in your scene. So I'm gonna use an area light. Think of this as those big box lights that you see in photography studios, and I find that they're ideal for this type of lighting. Oh, Maya, please. All right, so I'm gonna turn this off so it doesn't freak out. So I'm gonna scale this up. And I believe scale on these lights actually does affect stuff. You can see where it's pointing with this little pointer right there. Because if you scale this up, it's going to be basically a bigger box, you know. So something to think about. And I'm going to move this to the other side. Sorry about that. It's hard to deceive y'all. And I'm going to rotate this around on Y. So I'm going to do -180 right there. I need 270, don't I? Nope, I need 90. Foolish. All right, there we go. So this is going to be basically our main light in the scene, and then we're going to have our fill or our key light, I guess is what it's called. So might as well just name it to be that key light there. And then we need a kind of fill light from the other direction. I might give it a little bit of offset so it's not just completely black, but on this, because it's going to be coming from the other side. So if I rotate this and do 270 on this, you'll see what I'm talking about. Because it's coming straight on, it might give some harsh lighting on that. We'll see though, we'll see. And then we're going to have another light above as well. But right now, if I press play, you'll see you can't really see much in this scene yet. And that's because we haven't adjusted the exposure on these lights. So if you go into the attributes and down to, where is it? Exposure, right there. I'm just going to enter 10 into this. Boom. You'll see stuff starts popping into the scene, which is what we want. I'm going to move this back just so it clears the camera for sure. I'm also going to crank it up a little bit. Don't crank this too high. Like 100 will mess the math up that it's using to light the scene. So like even 20 is like, whoa. So let's make this, you know, 12. Now it's going to need to be a bit stronger than that. So I'm thinking something along the lines of this, 16. And then we need to crank up the exposure on our key, this is going to be our fill light. So if I go in here, change the light's name, fill light, shape 1. And if I adjust the exposure, see how much is happening. You need to crank it up pretty high. going to scale it up as well. And I'll bring it up just a little bit more. I'm going to rotate it in the scene. Sorry, my computer's going a little bit slow. It's hard to record and render and move all this stuff around for my poor old comp. So I'm going to move this over. And these are basically just digital versions of lights that they have in studios, you know. So also the scale of my scene is kind of messing with how these lights are performing. Because if you had it cropped in a lot more, it'd be easier to see what's going on, or see lighting changes that are being made. So you'll see it's rendering that out. I'm gonna I might go a little bit stronger with this area light over here. Might expand it as well. There. And then I'm also going to duplicate this fill light, and I'm going to make one. I'm going to rotate it, and you'll see. Oh, there we go. I'll rotate it on. Let's see. If I zero out, rotate Y. Oh my gosh! I'm just going to zero out everything. There. All right. I'm going to rotate on X. Hopefully, if Maya keeps thinking. Check OBS, make sure it's still able to capture. Alright, cool. Yeah, sorry, I just lost a lot of footage from the weekend because of that problem, so I'm just making sure it doesn't happen again. And I'm going to move this up and over. I might have to decrease the intensity on those, but we'll see. So yeah, these area lights are nice because they give you like some softer shadows. Like if you used a directional light for one of these fills, it would probably make really hard shadows on some of these. And feel free to like spruce up your stand if you feel like it. You don't even have to do a stand necessarily. I just wanted to show you how I would go about lighting a scene like that. And then I'm going to go into these exposure settings, crank it down. Crank this down a little bit too. I kind of liked it where it was, actually. Alright, so this is, well, I'm not going to fudge around with any more of this type of stuff. So I'm going to close down my render view. And then I'm going to go back to my render settings. I'm going to crank this up to 6. And hopefully, and I'm going to crank this up to 1080p, camera 1. And since we're going to be using a different thing, we don't have to worry about our name extensions on here. So closing that out. And I'm going to close OBS in case it messes up and I lose more footage. But basically what I'm going to be doing is I'm just going to click this button right here, not the IPR, not this eyeball, just right in the middle of here, this one. You'll see at the bottom of the left of the screen it says render the current frame, Arnold Render. That's what we're going to be doing. And then we're going to save that out the same way that we got those images of the character out. Not the image sequence, but just the straight up still renders. So yeah, be right back. All right, so rendered out my image. One thing to note is that you do have to click the panel that you want to render out of, or press space and go into it. Either way is gonna work. But I just wanted you to know that in case you render and it's like showing up from your perspective camera still. So I'm just gonna File, Save Image As, and I'm gonna do Prop Render. Perfect. And I'm gonna close this out. And so now I want to get a different angle of the prop as well. So I'm going to move my camera around. Right here, move that bad boy. And rotate it over this way. Perfect. I'm just going to get a little bit upward at it. Kind of zoom out a little bit there. And let's open up our, open up our render settings first. And then go to 540, just because I'm just going to preview that shot, make sure it looks fine. I'm going to crank this down from 6 to 2. Let's do 2, fine. Then close. I'm going to do Arnold, open Arnold Render View, press the yield play button. It's doing perspective shape, but it's not, because it's doing this camera down there. Because perspective shape is this one. I don't know why it's saying that. It's a little bit strange, but yeah, so I'm good with this. So then I'm going to close that out. I'm just going to expand this window, just make sure it's using that one. Render settings, go back in here, set it to 6 on the anti-aliasing, and then render 1080, and good to go. I'm going to do this button, render current frame, and I'm going to close OBS. And I'll be right back with you. Alright, so I got that image as well now. Perfect. So I need to save that out. File, save. And I'm going to do prop render. I'm going to do prop render 2. Don't want to save over that first render. And you'll see that I mean, it's a very shiny prop, you know. They're made of plastic. If you wanted it to be less shiny, you'd have to change the material attributes on that, or you just use like a Lambert, you know, the classic like basic Lambert material. So I'm done with this now, so I'm going to close that out. And we pretty much have all of our images that are going to be in the final, you know. So I'm going to save this scene as well. Continue right there. And now we need to do some stuff in Premiere. Alright, so now back in Premiere, we need to, let's add a title card. So I'm going to go into New Item, and I'm going to do Black Video. And I'm going to keep the 30 FPS because that's what I was working in before. If you're doing 24 FPS, that's fine. Perfectly fine. And I'm just going to drop that into the video segment. If I go into the, where is it, speed and duration, duration, I believe this is in frames, so if I am thinking in 30 FPS, 150 would be 5 seconds, 120 would be 4 seconds. Let's keep it around, yeah, let's keep it around 120. And there we go. And I'm going to use the text tool in here. I'm just going to do Mike Henriette. Computer animation 1. Delicious. And I'm gonna drag this to be. Actually, I'm gonna make this a little bit longer. The black video. And why not? Let's add some opacity on this. So at the start, I'm going to key the opacity there. I'm going to go a frame in to 30, or not a frame, a second in to 30. I'm going to key again. I'm going to go click back onto this key, and I'm going to drag it down to 0. Wait a minute, that might be dragging the. I'm going to drag my timeline over there. There we go. I'm going to make, oh, whoops, delete that key. All right, there we go. So now you see it comes in slowly. There we go. And now we can start dropping in our images. However, we still need to import. Oh, wait a second. There we go. Import those two prop renders. Should be back. Yeah, there we go. Make sure image sequence is not selected. Right there. So I'm just going to drag in this prop render 1, prop render 2. Let's check their duration. Speed duration. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Then we can start adding our character in there. And finally drag in our character. So let's preview this. Mike Henriette, Computer Animation 1, fantastic. Boom, right there. You could add opacity on both of these and have this be in a layer under that, but I mean, you know, this ain't no Premiere tutorial. We have the character, 2 different angles, and then the close-up, boom, right there. And there we go. And then preferably I'd like you to add some audio to this, so you just get some sort of banging track that you want to lay in here. Make sure it's not too loud. You just import it in. I don't have anything offhand. I might, but you would just import it and then drag it in there. Boom, bang. And you can also go into because some of these kind of got darker from like what they were, so you could go in and adjust their exposure and stuff, all those values. There's plenty of those. So then we need to go on and export it finally. So if you go into your file tab right here and just do export media, you'll see a bunch of options. This will be, yeah, I always use the codec H.264 for this, and then most of these settings will be right. Make sure it's at 1920 by 1080 there. We only pretty much need to worry about video and audio tabs. If you have audio in there, you're gonna need to. I don't know. I feel like I haven't experimented much with these, but these settings have been fine for me so far. And then since it's matching the source, it's keeping all of my settings there, and we should be good to go. So I'm just going to queue. All right. This is our render queue. It's going to output to, yeah, let's change this. Let's go to a desktop file, my export. Final render right there. There we go, and it's at the right settings. So just checking to make sure. Yeah, I think we're good to go. So I'm just gonna start the queue. You'll see it's blasting through that. All right, so now I'm gonna go to that directory and check out the file. Final render. Mike Henriette Computer Animation 1. Delicious. Delicious. Just skipping around, making sure it has all the settings. Yeah, very dope. All right, and then we have the walk as well. Very nice. All right, sweet. And then you just turn that into the Dropbox, and you are done. So yeah, hopefully that helps, and see you later.